Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, tell me if this sounds perfectly familiar. Have you ever reached the very end of the month, looked at your bank account, and thought, wait a minute, I make decent money, so where on earth did it all go? It's so frustrating, right? Well, today we're exploring some absolutely fascinating Japanese wisdom I recently came across. Instead of getting trapped in that exhausting cycle of constantly feeling like we just need to earn more, we're going to look at some brilliantly simple concepts for managing the actual flow of the money we already have. Picture this for a second. Imagine two people carrying water back to their homes. The person on the left, they've got this massive bucket, but it's riddled with these tiny, almost invisible holes. Drop by drop, the water just vanishes. But the person on the right has a much smaller bucket, except this one is completely solid. It's totally counterintuitive, right? But that smaller bucket actually brings home way more water. Not because it held more at the start, but simply because it lost less along the way. So let's dive into part 1, the leaky bucket trap. To really see how this plays out in the real world, let's look at the story of Yumi. She's a clinic worker outside Tokyo with a pretty average, ordinary income, who basically always felt that tight, stressful squeeze at the end of every single month. Now, we've all done exactly what Yumi did here. Checking your balance before spending money feels like the responsible thing to do, doesn't it? I mean, if the number looks big, you feel safe. But this whole digital banking habit, it's actually a massive trap. That total balance is essentially an illusion. It completely hides the fact that while your money is sitting there in one big happy pile, huge chunks of it are already spoken for. It's just sitting there, waiting to be spent on next week's groceries or next month's electricity bill. And that brings us to part 2, giving literally every dollar a job. We've got to stop just crossing our fingers and waiting to see what savings magically survive at the end of the month. Instead, we need to make our money visible before it disappears. Let's break this down. Say your household brings home $4,000 a month after taxes. On day 1, literally the day you get paid, you instantly assign that money jobs. Boom. $1,500 for housing and bills, $800 for groceries, $400 pulled right out and locked away for savings, $350 for transport, and maybe $250 for some guilt-free personal spending. By doing this right away, you stop asking yourself, how much money do I have? And you start asking the real question, how much money is actually free to spend? But knowing your categories is really only half the battle, which leads us to part 3, pacing and spending friction. Because let me tell you, a monthly budget without a speed limit is incredibly dangerous. Think about it. An $800 flexible grocery budget feels absolutely huge on the first of the month. You might splurge on some fancy ingredients, grab some nice snacks, and suddenly, by day 10, nearly half of it is gone. The solution here is setting budget speed limits by breaking those flexible expenses into weekly guideposts. So that $800 becomes roughly $200 a week. Now sure, some weeks might cost a little more, but having this weekly visibility completely prevents week 1 from selfishly stealing from week 3. Even doing all this, Yumi still faced a pretty big psychological hurdle, 180,000 yen. Seeing this balance in an app, which is a little over $1,000 US, it feels comfortable, but psychologically, it was completely fooling her because quietly hiding inside that big total was her rent money, her insurance money, and her future food money. Now, contrast that massive number with 18,000 yen. This was her genuinely flexible, completely unassigned money. You see, when you're staring at a massive digital balance, a quick tap on a screen feels entirely weightless. It's too easy. But looking at a handwritten, honest, much smaller number, that introduces the friction we so desperately need in this crazy one-click digital world we live in. All right, let's move on to part 4, plugging those hidden leaks. The big bills like rent and car payments are the obvious cracks in our bucket, right? We usually plan for those. The real mystery is finding where the drops invisibly vanish every single day. Take a look at these. Notice how incredibly normal all these expenses look. A quick convenience store stop after a long day at work, a streaming subscription you barely watch, a tiny little add-on order just to hit that free shipping threshold. None of these feel like financial emergencies. But that is exactly why they are so lethal to a budget. They are the tiny, non-urgent holes just draining your money, drop by drop, without you ever even noticing. So Yumi decided to do a 7-day tracking test of just her optional purchases. And after a week, she asked herself one profound, brilliant question. Would I happily spend this money again? That's the secret right there. You don't start fixing your budget by brutally cutting out the hobbies you absolutely love. No way. You start by cutting the things you barely even remember buying. And honestly, that doesn't feel like deprivation at all. It just feels like plugging a leak. Which brings us to a highly effective habit. Let desire cool down. Look, we live in a world built on manufactured urgency. Limited stock, sale ends in 1 hour, one-click checkout. Modern retail literally forces you to make a decision while your desire is running red hot. But this Japanese practice of intentional delay uses time as a tool. Desire has a temperature, and if you simply wait, it cools. Here's a perfect example. When Yumi's husband, Haru, wanted these new headphones, instead of falling back into that old habit, checking the big bank balance and buying them immediately, she used a new habit. She simply wrote the purchase down, and they waited. She didn't say no, she just created some distance. And you know what? After a few quiet days, all that manufactured urgency just faded away. Forced restriction creates resistance, but intentional delay creates clarity. Okay, so what happens when you finally free up some of this cash? Say a car loan is paid off, or you finally cancel that unused subscription. If you don't immediately redirect that newly freed up money to a specific new job, like an emergency fund or a savings goal, lifestyle inflation will quietly, almost magically, absorb it within 3 months. I mean, you were already living perfectly fine without that money, so redirecting it immediately requires literally zero new sacrifice on your part. So what is the ultimate payoff for all of this? Let's look at part 5, redefining financial wealth. After months of applying these principles, Yumi's life didn't actually look drastically different from the outside. She didn't buy a mansion, but internally, on the inside, absolutely everything changed. This whole approach teaches us something super profound. The first true sign of wealth is not some giant number sitting in an investment account. Wealth is space. It's the ability to reach the final week of the month without that familiar knot of panic in your stomach. A paycheck that actually lasts creates space, and having that financial space eventually transforms into deep, lasting peace of mind. So how do we build this? Try this quick 5-step pen and paper exercise right before your next payday. Step 1, what absolutely must be paid? Think housing and debt. Step 2, what must be protected? Pull out your savings immediately. Step 3, what needs to last the whole month? Budget out your groceries and transport. Step 4, what can I enjoy without guilt? Give yourself a realistic, fun, personal allowance. And finally, step 5, what stays in the account as a safe buffer? Doing this immediately stops you from treating every single dollar you see as available to spend. So here is my challenge to you for the next 7 days. Try the pause experiment. Before making literally any optional purchase, just write it down, step back, and wait. Let the heat of that desire cool down. It leaves us with one pretty critical question to reflect on when we look at our own bank accounts. Are you going to keep exhausting yourself trying to carry a bigger and bigger bucket, or is it finally time to just plug those invisible leaks